How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In this week's build, I am making a live edge walnut side table. But before we get on with the build, there's something that I have to do. You see, I love working with walnut, but my lungs, they do not. Therefore, the beard has to go. It's the only way I can get a tight enough seal with the respirator to be able to move forward with this project, and because this is the kind of dedication you can expect from me on a weekly basis in this channel. If you're not already subscribed, I encourage you to hammer that subscribe button for tons of great woodworking content on a weekly basis. All right, let's move forward with today's build. Before we get into the build, I wanted to show you what the finished piece looks like. It is a live edge walnut top with a cantilever design where the bottom and the top of the cantilevered arms are also made out of walnut, that live edge, and it looks like that the edge kind of flows all the way through the vertical piece. And the vertical piece is also a piece of walnut, and while it's not very easily apparent, there is a little bit of taper where the top is narrower than the bottom. It helps with the weight distribution, but also adds a little bit of a more elegant look to it. Okay, so now that you've seen it, let me show you how I built it. All right, so we're gonna start out this project by working on the top piece first. What I have here is a live edge walnut that is, I believe it's 1/4, yep, 1/4 material. And it's roughly, you know, mind you, with the bark and everything, it's about 15.5 inches here, probably 17, 16 inches here, etc. So we don't need the whole piece, we just need a small section of it. And I want actually the top to be 22 inches in length. And so I've gone ahead and put a chalk line at around 23 inches. So that'll give us a little bit of working room and we can trim that off when we need to. So we're going to first make a cut here, and then I'm going to show you how I flatten this top. All right, so with the live edges cleaned up, now it is time for us to focus on the top. In order to flatten this top, normally we would use a jointer, but my jointer is 12 inches wide, and this is, you know, from 15 to 16 inches wide or so. So that's not going to work, and, you know, I have no intention of cutting the piece in half only to flatten it and then glue it back up together. That's not really the aesthetic that we're going for here. So one of the ways to overcome that problem is to use a hand tool. So what you see here is a 5.5 jack plane. It's made by Veritas, and we can use this to be able to take small amounts of shavings off and kind of watch our progress and make sure that the surface is flat. All right, so I think I've got a pretty nice and flat surface in the middle section here. The edges are still kind of a low spot, and while you can use a hand plane to get to all of it and kind of remove a little bit more material, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I know this is flat, and I'm going to use that as a reference on my drum sander, because my drum sander is 25 inches wide. And while, you know, a drum sander is not really an ideal tool for this task, a planer is. I don't have one, and as long as you're kind of patient and you take small amounts of bite at a time with the drum sander, it can be done. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as an option because my arms are tired. So with the top surfaced and the bottom surfaced as well, we can now kind of put this away for a little bit and focus on the base. Now, I have to imagine I'm not the only woodworker with a hoarding problem, particularly with offcut pieces that we could probably use one day, someday. Anyways, I think some of these pieces are like 4 or 5 years old, and I've held on to them, just like many of you guys are. And so today we're actually going to put it to work. So of course we're going to use the big piece in the back here for the vertical part that's going to serve as the spine of the base. And then we kind of have to decide how we want to make use of these little live edges for the top and the bottom piece. And I've kind of, you can tell I kind of played with it a little bit earlier. I do like this for the bottom. And then I think I like this one. I'm gonna probably use these two for now and then continue to hoard the rest. All right, so I decided to do all of the milling off camera just to save us a little bit of time. I did trim the vertical piece to 28.5 inches in length, and this is going to serve as the height of our side table. 28.5 because the top is just a little over 1.5 inch, so that's going to equal a total of 30 inches. The two other pieces that you see here, the one in the middle is going to serve as the lower arm or leg, whatever you want to call it. This is a little too tall, so we're going to trim a little bit of the height off, and then we're going to, of course, trim off the length to be 22 inches, which is also the length of our top. And for the bottom piece here, I chose this particular piece because it's a little bit slimmer profile. Anyway, so let me trim these two pieces to length and get everything situated, and then we can talk about joinery. So with everything else being very organic, this vertical piece is way too geometric. And in order to kind of help alleviate that look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a taper. So the bottom is going to be the widest, and then the top is going to be a little bit narrower. I think I'll probably take about 1 inch or so off, and then we'll kind of make that cut on a bandsaw. In addition to that, what I want to do is I want to, if you look at it from the side profile, again, very boxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove a little bit of the material and basically put a heavy chamfer on it. All right, so the chamfers are completed, and I am much happier with the way that this looks. And it also really feels good to the touch. And I think quality furniture should evoke that emotion where you want to interact with it and touch it. So anyways, with that being said, we're going to pre-sand every surface because, you know, when it comes to joinery, the thickness of each of these pieces matter significantly to each other. So we're going to pre-sand everything so that we have the exact final dimensions for joinery. All right, so for the joinery, both the bottom piece as well as the top piece has the same concept behind it. So what we need to do is create a little bit of a channel down here that's going to be the exact width of the vertical piece, such that, you know, with the corresponding channel in here, we can slide this down onto it and then they interlock with each other. I do want to create a little bit of an overhang of this live edge piece on the other side of the vertical piece so that it looks like it's kind of flowing through the vertical piece. Let me show you how that's done on a table saw. Alright, so with the channel cut, now we have a problem, and the problem is this live edge right here. Normally, when you drive this into a mortise, you have a flat bottom to register onto, and there's no way we're going to be able to kind of replicate this undulation onto the vertical piece. So instead, what we do is we take a square and then a depth that we want our mortise to be, and then we mark it. And then we'll trim this off at the bandsaw, and that'll give us a nice tenon for us to drive into the vertical piece. So with both the top and bottom pieces completed and having a reference flat surface here, we can now use the thickness of this material and also the depth of this material to create a channel in here such that these two will interlock with each other. And this applies to the top as well. Just a quick side note, I am going to drill a couple holes in here that's going to allow us to use threaded inserts and fix this to the top. So I have the tabletop upside down, and this is the underside here with the base. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the same drill bit that we used to drill the hole, the through hole anyway, and we're going to kind of use the pointed part of the Forstner bit to make a mark. And then once we made the mark, we know where all of these holes are positioned. And then we can remove the top. And then with the top removed, we can then kind of locate the little point that we made here and then use an appropriate sized Forstner bit. And as soon as the tape starts sweeping some of the sawdust that's produced, then you know you've kind of arrived at the right depth. So with the hole completed, we can then drive our threaded inserts. I really like using these solid brass machine threaded inserts as opposed to the kind that I see a lot of woodworkers using. There's nothing wrong with these kind. They're definitely a lot cheaper, but they kind of feel that way too. I don't like the way they feel, and especially on a furniture like this that's going to be more heirloom, I really prefer using the nice brass inserts. They do come with a driver, or at least I think you have to buy them separately, but you can use this as a way to drive the screws in. Using a fine grit paper, we can then sand all of the surfaces to make sure that it is ready for finish. For the finish, I'm using nitrocellulose lacquer. This is a semi-gloss material. And I'm using a little bit of lacquer thinner, probably around 10 to 15% or so, to be able to thin out the material so that the gun has a better chance of kind of spreading that material nice and consistently. I'm using an HVLP spray gun from Harbor Freight. This actually works really, really well, despite some of the more expensive ones out there. And this gets hooked up to a compressor to be able to supply it with air so that it can atomize the product. Alright, so the lacquer has had a full day to cure in a room temperature environment. It is dry to the touch and it's hard enough such that we can do the assembly at this point in time. But before we get into the assembly, I wanted to talk a quick little bit about spraying nitrocellulose lacquer and some things to keep in mind. The first and foremost is you definitely want to wear a respirator that has a cartridge specifically for volatile organic compounds, because nitrocellulose lacquer has a ton of volatile organic compounds mixed into the solution, and it's extremely bad for your health, so you definitely want to protect yourself from it. Whenever possible, spray the material in a well-ventilated space. If that's not possible, make sure that the space you're spraying it in is detached from living environments. We're in a detached garage here, so that's not a problem, but I also ventilated the heck out of this space before I came in here today, and once the finish was cured. Okay, so with that being said, let's get to assembly so I can show you what the finished product looks like. And now is the hard part of turning it. You know, it actually is a lot heavier. That was not a good way to do it. It's a lot heavier than it looks. There we go.
That's all for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click the like button below and consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.